First, let me just make a few simple announcements that these meetings will be held Wednesday evenings at 8, Sunday afternoon at 2, and that they will be supported entirely by voluntary gifts. The work of the Infinite Way, as you know, is not organized, and it never will be. It is being presented and will continue to be presented as an unfoldment of truth as it has come into and through my consciousness, and it will be presented to those desiring it, and only to those who seek it. And it asks no questions of one's religious beliefs or affiliations or lack of them. It is a presentation of truth as it has come through, and it is for the use of those who are enabled to receive it and to respond to it. But in presenting it, there is a pattern. The writings began with The Infinite Way, the book entitled The Infinite Way. And since then, a whole series of books have come through, all of which are actual classworks, and were taken down as this is being taken down, and later made into books. There are probably 30 more books that have not yet been printed. The writings, together with the recordings, meetings, lectures, classes, and the monthly letter, constitute ways of maintaining our consciousness on the level that will make it possible for us always to live in and through truth itself. The whole idea is that ultimately, as we live in truth, truth takes us over, and then we don't live in truth anymore. It lives our lives. It takes over and performs the functions that heretofore have been performed through the use of the word I. I do this and I do that. But the day comes when I live, yet not I. Christ liveth. This truth, or consciousness of truth, liveth my life. And so we have access to these various means and helps in study. During these meetings, should you have questions, if you will write them out or type them and leave them at the book table, I will answer them as quickly as possible. If you leave them before a meeting up here, I will answer them during that meeting if possible. Now, in our first meditation, it was brought out that if we were to hold in consciousness the realization that thy grace is my sufficiency in all things, if we were to make that a part of our experience every hour of the day, at least for 1, 2, 3 minutes, pondering that idea of God as the source and the activity of our good, that it would only be a short while. With some it would be a few days, with some it would be a few weeks, and with some it would be a few months. But ultimately, that idea would take over in consciousness, and less and less would we be depending on person or thing or circumstance or condition, and more would we be relaxing into the realization of divine grace as the source of our activity, the source of supply, the source of health, the source of companionship, the source of everything good in our daily experience. Now, ordinarily, I would say that we should practice a meditation of that kind for 3, 4, 5, 6 months with anything else that would unfold through it, and probably then be ready to go on to something else. But because it isn't possible to sit and wait that long for the students to work up to that, I am going forward twice a week with higher meditations, higher lessons in the truth, leaving it with you to put into practice as you will and work it out in your own time. So that in our second meditation, we took the idea of God as one power, one law, one substance, one cause. Now, this is probably one of the highest spiritual ideas ever given to the world. It was given to the world thousands of years ago. It has come down through history, and it found a tremendous place in the teaching of the Master Christ Jesus. His entire ministry was really based on God as one. He repeated the old Hebrew teaching of Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Now, as you rightly understand that, especially in view of his later giving us the first commandment as one of two, the first commandment acknowledging God alone, you come to a strange realization that you are never using truth over error. You are never using God over evil. You are never using the power of good over error. When you come to the realization of this meditation of God as one, you come to the realization that God is the one and only law. Therefore, you do not use it to overcome or destroy any other law or the effects of any other law. If you understand God as the one substance, in the beginning, Genesis says, God created the world, all that was therein. Anything that God did not create was not created, was not made. Therefore, you have only one substance. And if you have only one substance, you cannot use the power of God to destroy or heal or improve another substance. You have only one. In the same way, as you understand God as life, you only have one life. You never have a life to save. You never have a life to heal, to redeem. But you say the world is full of sin, sickness, and death. Yes, the world is. But the Master says, I have overcome the world. In other words, this truth is the overcoming of that world of sin, disease, and death. And the overcoming is in what way? Not by destroying anything, but by redeeming or raising. If you destroy this temple, I will raise it up in 3 days. He healed the sick, he raised the dead, all to show that he did not destroy anything, but he brought into newness of life. And through what? Through a realization of one power. And thereby he gave us 2 marvelous teachings that the world has not yet been able to accept, except in the case of the few mystics and their followers who have been able to adopt it. The nearest to the acceptance of it is in the Quaker faith. And that teaching is that you must put up your sword. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. In other words, stop fighting that which is non-existent, because by fighting it, you destroy yourself through accepting the so-called error as an error that must be overcome or destroyed. Now you watch this carefully, because in the physical sense of life, we use one form of material means to overcome another. We use arms and ammunition, for instance, to overcome some of our enemies. We use medicines to overcome other forms of it. We use diet and exercise to overcome other forms of it. We always have one good material power with which to overcome another material power that we call not so good. Now, there's nothing wrong about that. This is not a criticism or a judgment, because there is a material state of consciousness, and unless you use the world's weapons on that level of consciousness, you find yourself in a very helpless and hopeless place. Now, when the day came that it was recognized that there was a higher power than physical, than material power, a mental power, there began another era, an era in which we used the power of mind over matter, or the power of truth over error, or the power of love over hate. In other words, there was a good mental concept used to destroy an evil mental concept. But always we had the 2 powers, the power of good and the power of evil. However, with the realization brought to the world through the revelation of the Master, Christ Jesus, we had this higher teaching of God or Spirit as the all and only, God or Spirit as the one, and beside him there is no other. Beside God there is no power to overcome, there is no power to destroy, there is no power to resist or to be resisted. God alone is. God alone is. But you say, what about all of these appearances? That is why you had the Christ revelation of one, because the world was full of appearances. The appearances of sin, of disease, of death, of false religious teachings, of everything else that bound men politically, economically, socially, culturally, bound men in limitation. Because we had those appearances abroad in the world, a master came into expression to reveal the answer. And the answer wasn't more and bigger armies or more and bigger bombs, nor was the answer more and better material powers. The answer was not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit. The teaching was given to us that if you abide in me and let my word abide in you, none of these things of the world could touch you. dwell in the secret place of the Most High, none of these things will come nigh your dwelling place. Live and move and have your being in God, none of these things will come nigh your dwelling place. And so that was our second meditation. Now, never let that one get away from you any more than you would want the realization of divine grace as your supply to get away from you. Never for the rest of your life will you want to forget that God's grace is your sufficiency. Never will you want to forget that you don't need so many dollars with which to go to the mainland. You don't need so many dollars with which to meet your rent. You don't need so many pounds of this or ounces of that. Your only need is the realization of divine grace. Divine grace is my sufficiency in every situation. And if you abide in that for the next 1,000 years, you will find that never will you be separate and apart from your good, because the grace of God appears in the form necessary to you at the moment. When the master needed transportation, a jackass was found waiting for him. We will need transportation, but no jackass will be found for us. It will be an airplane all ready to take off, or a steamship, or an automobile, or a submarine, or whatever may follow those. The nature of the Christ is to appear in the form necessary to our unfoldment at the moment. We also need clothing here in Hawaii, but you'll notice that as you realize divine grace, it will not appear as a fur coat unless you have in mind a trip to the mainland soon. And then, well, it may appear as a fur coat because it will appear to fit the emergency of the moment. So, every day you will be faced for a long, long time with some appearance which ordinarily would require some great power to overcome or destroy or improve for you. And it is in those emergencies that you must rise to the realization, no, I don't even need to remember a truth. Since harmony is all it is, since divine grace is all it is, since oneness is all it is, I need nothing beyond that. There was a time when I was meeting or trying to meet a situation of a woman who had been ill for many, many years, and I was having as little success as others who had been on this case before, when a call came one night of great distress. And I sat for many hours that night in meditation, reflection, the end of which, no, not the end of which, but finally the thought came, oh, if I could just know a truth, if I could just find the right truth would meet this need. Oh, what is the correct truth in this case? What is the truth I should be knowing with which to meet this? And then I became quiet for a few moments, and it came to me, I am the truth. That which you are seeking, I am. That which you are seeking, I am. That which I am seeking, I am. Oh, no. I am seeking a truth with which to meet this claim. That which I am seeking, I am. You mean I am the truth that is to meet this claim? Oh, that's a strange thing. I do not need a truth. I am the truth. Oh, but then quickly came, yes, don't you see that is a universal truth? Since I am the truth, so is this one who believes they are in need of help, they too are this same truth. Oh, if I am the truth and they are the truth, nothing further is necessary, and the healing took place. Now, since then, we know this. Since there is no evil to be overcome, there is no truth necessary with which to overcome it. You see that point? You understand that? That in order for you to need a truth, there must be something for you to need it for. But since all harmony is, there's no truth to need, except the realization. The realization that comes when you know that divine grace is sufficiency, and when you know that there is only one power. Then you need no truth to destroy, heal another power. Now I come to this third meditation, which will make more clear that which has gone before. There is no power outside your being or mine. There is no power for good or for evil. There is no power anywhere in this world to act upon you for good or for evil. The only power there is within you. Now, in order to understand, enjoy, appreciate, demonstrate, if you will, the harmonies of existence, you must let that power flow out from you. You must not expect it to come to you either from God or from man, because if you do, you will sit around for many, many years waiting and then end up without it. You see, it is like, well, let us take the subject of supply. Supply cannot come to you. There is no way, there's no place for it to come from. The kingdom of God is within you. Therefore, you must open a way for that supply to flow out from you. Never, never, never can supply come to you. It can appear in our human scene to come to us, but be assured of this. It isn't coming to us. It is coming back to us from that which we sent out. It is, what was it? Bread cast upon the waters? Ah, yes. I am the bread of life. I am truth. Therefore, the truth, the wine, the meat that you let flow from you is that which, to human sense, appears to come back and meet your need. In other words, let us put it this way. There is no way for us to like each other, and there is no reason for us to like each other or do anything for each other as strangers. But the very moment that one of us begins to let truth pour forth, that very moment everyone in tune with spirit becomes aware of it, and they begin bringing back the outer world's goods to us. Let me put it this way. Paul says, if I give you of the spiritual substance, is it not right that I receive from you the material? The only wrong about it would be expecting it. We have no right to expect anything of anyone, since we are dedicated to the truth that God is the source and activity of our being and of our supply. Therefore, we have no right to look to anyone for anything. Our work must be to fulfill our obligation to this world, the obligation of loving our neighbor as ourselves. Now, the kingdom of God, of allness, is within you. And so nothing is going to come to you except it first flow out from you. And so there has to be a way of doing that. And this is the way. The activity of truth in your consciousness is the source of harmony to your experience. In other words, if you live the ordinary human life, just caring for the human things of the world, going about doing your human duties and human functions and human good, then in that case you may be acted upon by good and evil of the world as it may be hanging around you, the evil or the good influences. In other words, if there's a depression, you may suffer from it, and if there's a boom, you may benefit from it. If there is a period of good weather, you may feel fine, and if there's a period of bad weather, you may feel ill. That is only because you are walking around empty, letting yourself be filled by any and every draft that blows around and every opinion that floats around in the air. We are like antennas as human beings. We pick up all the things that are around. In other words, as we sit here filled with the spirit of life and truth and love, every one of us is picking up something of good, of God, of a spiritual nature. But now let us all go down to the burlesque show from here and then begin to see what we would be picking up from the atmosphere. You know that that is true. You are bound as human beings to be antennas receiving that which is in the air around you. One of the outstanding things that I noted on the last trip across the continent is that this country is mad with fear of atomic bombs. Every city you go into, you hear, well, do you think it's going to fall on this city, or do you think I ought to get a house in Arkansas? Oh, the fear of it, and you can feel the amount of it that is in the air. When you get to Europe, it isn't there. They've been through so many bombs, they do not fear it anymore. Now, there is no need for us to be human antennas for the good and evil that is floating around. We, and nobody but ourselves, can overcome that situation. But we can. And we have this teaching direct from our Master. We have it also in the Old Testament. Those that dwell in the secret place of the Most High, none of these evils shall come nigh their dwelling place. But we have a specific teaching in the 15th chapter of John on this point, that if you abide in me, if you let my word abide in you, then you are on the spiritual path. Now we have the counterpart of that today in this. Remember it. The activity of truth in your consciousness is the source of harmony in your experience. Now, to what extent you permit the activity of truth to go on in your consciousness determines the extent of the harmony that you will reap. You sow, and the reaping will take care of itself. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. If you sow to the flesh, if you sow, even to the good flesh, if you sow good human thoughts, you still are not going to reap your spiritual demonstration of harmony, eternality, infinity, completeness, perfection, and satisfaction. In order to reap your spiritual good, you have to sow spiritually. And the way to do that is to keep consciousness filled with truth. Now, it doesn't mean to give up your occupation. It doesn't mean to give up your business or your home or your family. What it means is that throughout the day you find opportunities for keeping consciousness filled with truth. One of the finest ways of doing it, and one of the ways that brings the greatest result, is this. As you sit here before me, you appear to be a group of people, and in varying degrees of health, and varying degrees of wealth, and varying degrees of goodness. But that's the appearance. Sitting here, one dare not accept that. Sitting here, one must abide in this truth. God is individual life. God is individual soul. God is individual being. God is individual being. God is your being. God is the only being. That is the invisible, but nevertheless, to me, the real. And that which appears here is the externalization of God being. And it will appear so in proportion to your individual acceptance of this truth. But as far as I am concerned, sitting up here, I have only one function, and that is not to recognize you as good or bad, as sick or well, as sinful or pure, happy or unhappy. My function is only one, and that is to realize that God is your individual soul. God is your capacity. God is the source of your inspiration. God is the source of your supply, of your activity, of your companionship. And as long as I hold to that, the activity of truth is going on in my consciousness, and you know what happens? I draw from you love. Can't help it. I am not one of these people who are animal lovers. And the reason is that I have no awareness of them. Having been brought up in New York City, and where we had no pets and where I had no access to animals, they just formed no part of my life or my consciousness, and so it is something to which I am entirely indifferent. However, in this life of the Spirit, in which I have been since 1928, I understand and know God as the life of all that is. And the result is that when I come around an animal, the first thing it does is come right up here to sit and won't move. And the other night I had occasion to be in a home where they had a Siamese cat, and that cat refused to get off my lap the whole evening. Now, it isn't that I love cats. I know nothing about them and have never been around them and have no desire for them humanly. But there it was. That is exactly what happened. And the reason is this. As we abide in the consciousness of this truth, that God is the soul, the life, the substance, the wisdom of individual being, it makes no difference now whether it's a person or whether it's an animal or whether it's a vegetable or a mineral. There is an attraction that takes place. Now, every individual in this world must make their ultimate spiritual demonstration on the same basis. The activity of truth in your consciousness. Now, the activity of truth concerns what is the truth about God and man. What you know and what you find in yourself to be the truth about God and man determines the extent of your demonstration. Just in that same way is healing brought about. Healing is not a direction of thought. I mean, healing from the spiritual basis is not a direction of thought to anyone out here. Healing is an activity of truth in the consciousness of an individual. That thought is never directed outside to a patient. It is never directed outside to a person. It is something that takes place in here about the person or individual. In other words, I might sit here when you present a claim of insufficiency of any nature, and I would not direct my thought at you. I would within myself review what is the truth about God and God's creation. And because you had tuned in or asked for help, you would be the one receiving help. But not because of any direction of thought in your direction. Never in our work do we take the name of a patient. Never do we take the name of the disease. Never do we take up any phase of the claim whatsoever as it pertains to a person. Always we take the appearance and turn back to what is the truth about that which appears to be. That also is the activity of truth in consciousness. It is never directed at anyone, and the reason that the individual receives the benefit is that they have tuned in either by asking for help or writing or telegraphing or asking someone else, or someone has asked help for them. Now, it may be that you have a child or a wife or a husband or a parent, and you ask for help for them because they are a part of your consciousness. And you make yourself a part of the consciousness of the practitioner, that individual will receive the help. But not because the practitioner has to know their name or their disease, or not because the practitioner in any wise projects thought to that individual. Now, I understand full well that this is not the method used in other approaches to mental and spiritual healing. And so I am not commenting and I am not teaching any other way. I am showing you that which has proved itself with me since 1930, since I came into the active work. And this is our way. This has been the fruitful way with me. This is not to take you from any other way that is proving successful with you. But those of you who are here and seeking to know what the infinite way is, this is it. It is an abiding in the truth and letting the truth abide in me, the truth about God and about spiritual creation. Not about a human being, because there isn't any truth about a human being. The only truth about a human being is that the sooner they outgrow being one, the better. Our function is to become children of God. Because when we are children of God, then heirs, joint heirs with Christ in God. And we do that in this manner. As we abide in truth, and as we let truth consciously abide within us, a transformation of consciousness takes place. Now, a consciousness imbued with truth is a benediction, a blessing to all upon whom it rests. A consciousness imbued with truth. Remember, the consciousness of an individual when he's a businessman or a housewife is not the same consciousness as the consciousness of that same individual after they have for years and years and years filled themselves with truth. On the other hand, an individual who today may have been Saul of Tarsus can tomorrow be St. Paul. Now why? Let us understand that. Saul of Tarsus represents a very bad state of consciousness, a persecutor of the Christ, a killer, if you will, a murderer. But overnight, he becomes St. Paul. Now why? Here's the reason. Saul of Tarsus was a seeker of truth. Saul of Tarsus gave his life, his days, his nights to the study of truth. True, it wasn't a very high form of truth. It was the Orthodox Hebrew church teachings, but nevertheless it was the highest to which he had access at that particular time, and he didn't want it for a selfish purpose, remember. He was seeking truth for truth's sake, and all he could do was start where he was, and that's what he did. He gave up his free citizenship in Rome. He gave up the high standing of his family in Rome to become equal with the Hebrew slaves in the Holy Land in order to find truth. Not because he needed healing of anything, certainly not because he needed enriching, because he had a trade and he had a wealthy background. No, he did it for love of truth. And so his consciousness was filled with whatever available truth there was. And of course, the Old Testament was full of some very good truth. Now, because of his searching, because he kept himself filled with whatever truth was available, and you must remember that he filled himself with it as students do, morning, noon, and night, reading in it, praying in it, meditating in it, filling himself full of whatever truth was available. Because of that, he was obeying that which later came forth. If ye abide in me, if you let my word abide in you. He was fulfilling that to the highest that was available to him, and thereby preparing himself for the experience that came to him on the road of Damascus that changed him into a disciple of the Master. Now, from the very moment that we begin to fill our consciousness with truth, we become not just a human being with human goodness and human badness, human wisdom and human ignorance. No, no, no. A new note enters our consciousness, a spiritual note, a spiritual factor, a spiritual power, a spiritual presence. The moment we open our consciousness to truth, the fourth dimension of life starts to flow. Now, even from that minute, something takes place within us that benefits us and others. Even from the minute, the day, the week, the month that we begin to fill ourselves with truth, some harmony appears in the outer world. You may not at first notice it. It may, first of all, be called to your attention by others who want to know how it is you look so much younger, or seem to be so much healthier, or have lost so much weight or gained so much as the need may have been. Or it may be that you have yourself noticed an improvement in your health, or in your loss of fears, or in a greater sense of supply. But this you must know. The consciousness of truth is the substance of our outer experience. Therefore, the very first trace of spirit or truth in your consciousness must externalize itself. Please remember that. There's no way to avoid it. There is no such thing as an unmanifested good or unmanifested consciousness of truth. There is no such thing. There is no such thing. The Master warned about not hating our brothers and not looking on a woman with lust, because as soon as we entertain that internally, it won't be long before it externalizes itself. Don't believe that you can avoid it. If you let your thought dwell on envy, jealousy, malice, lust, it must very, very quickly externalize itself, but it is much more true with truth. You cannot abide in truth for very long without truth being evident. You know why? The Word becomes flesh and dwells among us. Now, the Word does not become flesh. The Word is the substance of flesh. And the moment you have the Word, You have the substance and the form outwardly. But it is all in proportion. All in proportion. As Saul of Tarsus filled himself with all the truth he could, eventually the time came when he could be a full disciple of the Master. John opened his consciousness so completely that the Master was enabled to pour into him the full gospel of John, which is, of course, the greatest of all the four, and probably the greatest spiritual writing on earth at the present time, or known to be on earth. And he received it directly from the Master within himself. Why? Well, it couldn't have been an accident, and it couldn't have been because of 1 hour a day given to truth. It must have been because he had consecrated his life to truth. Now, we can't do that in the beginning. Our modern, if they could in those days. In those days, if you felt a call to truth, you just quit everything else and went out and went to some monastery or some religious order, and there you lived without having to earn your living beyond doing some of the tasks around the place, and you could devote your entire life to the spiritual work. We can't do that today. We must continue in our human activities until such time as the healing consciousness is so developed that people are willing to take care of our expenses in return for that healing ministry. Then we too can give up the human activities and abide entirely in this work, in this life, in this study, in this practice. However, nobody ever gets to practicing anything 4 hours a day until they have first learned to practice 4 or 8 minutes a day or 40 minutes a day. And so our task this minute has nothing to do with next year. It has to do with this day, with this night. And it is this day and it is this night in which we must accept the principle of letting the activity of truth take place within us. And we are the ones who consciously must decide that it will take place every hour of our waking day, even if it only takes place for 30 seconds in an hour, or 1 minute, or 1.5 minutes in an hour, that we will make the conscious effort to keep it alive. Now, if we keep truth active in our consciousness 1 or 2 or 3 minutes of every hour, of its own accord, it will spread over into 4, 5, or 6 minutes without our even knowing it. And then the day comes when we find that it has taken place for a half hour or an hour, and we thought that only the usual 5 minutes had gone by. We are not responsible for the living in the activity of truth for hours at a time. That comes as an act of grace. We are responsible only for beginning with minutes. Now, assuming that we have agreed that every hour of our waking day that we will consciously break off the trend of our human thought to take up some form of activity of truth within our consciousness. Well, it can be along the line, of course, of realizing grace as our sufficiency, because that makes the invisible our dependency rather than the visible. We can give time and effort to the realization of God as the only power, and thereby consciously come to the place where we do not refute or fight other so-called powers. But the best activity in this line, the greatest one, is this third one, in which you consciously realize God as the life of individual being, God as the soul or spirit or substance of individual being. In other words, every time that you see a coconut tree, consciously remember that there is an invisible presence acting in and through that tree to produce the coconuts. Every time that you go near the ocean, consciously remember that there is a spirit at work. There is an invisible something stocking the ocean with fish and other wonderful things that are at the bottom of that sea. Remember that at every hour of the day and night there is an invisible something operating to stock that ocean. Every time you look up into the sky, please remember that there is an invisible something filling the sky with birds. Every time you meet a person, remember that there is an invisible something that is the very soul of their being, the very source of their good. Every time you see sickness or accident on the streets or in the headlines or on the radio, remember that right there, invisible, is the activity of God going on, and as that person becomes conscious of it, they will rise above those infirmities. Just as in proportion as we become conscious of God as the central theme of life, we rise above the infirmities, the limitations that have bound us. If we are not making the perfect 100% demonstration at the moment, let no one of us sit in judgment upon another. We don't have to be in a hurry. We have eternity before us. There is no reason why we overnight have to become angels. Let us be very grateful if at any given moment the Spirit of God touches us and we begin to unfold at this moment and proceed in an orderly fashion to our complete spiritual realization. I have witnessed in the past the mistake that many people have made on coming into a religious, especially a metaphysical religious work, all of a sudden trying to be angels. They immediately threw their drinks away and their smokes away and their medicines away, all because they had come to some teaching that said it wasn't necessary. Well, the truth is it isn't necessary, but don't try to prove it until the Spirit of God takes over and is there to replace the dependency on these externals. Oh yes, I have seen people throw their cards away and their bridge away and their canasta. Oh, they were all set for the spiritual life, but it didn't last too long. You see, suppression and repression is not the spiritual way. And just intellectually making up your mind that I will never take another smoke, or I will never take another drink, or I will never take another bit of medicine is apt to get you into a great deal of trouble, because these spiritual harmonies are not produced by willpower nor by the human desire to be rid of them. They are produced only by spiritual evolution that takes place in consciousness. Don't try humanly to make up your mind to be an angel right away. You may succeed, but the chances are against you. Too many people have had to retrace their steps later and start all over again by trying to maintain a state of consciousness they hadn't achieved. They immediately are going to try to attain the state of consciousness, this life that was lived by Jesus Christ or some of the other saints and seers and sages, and it isn't quite done that way. But if you keep your consciousness filled with truth, you will find this, that just as physical infirmities disappear, so do these other things, these outer desires for the things of the world. They become less and less and less. Smoking drops away, drinking drops away. The overindulgence of the attachment to radios and televisions and theaters. Nothing wrong about these things in and of themselves, but the overindulgence of them, filling oneself with the clamor of the outer senses, is all wrong. But there's no way to stop it until something replaces it within you, and that something has to be spirit, and that is brought about through maintaining an activity of truth in your consciousness. Open your consciousness to truth just in the same way that you come here. Why do you come here? There's only one reason, and that is for truth, life, love. How are you to achieve it here? Not merely by sitting here physically. Oh no, that won't do it. Sitting here physically will not do it. There has to be an open consciousness. There has to be an opening to let it in. Otherwise, you could sit here physically and keep it blocked out. No. There has to be a state of receptivity even when you come here. And once you develop that, you'll find that the evening may come, or the day, when you can't be physically present, but you'll get the message sitting home or wherever you happen to be at the moment. You'll find that you have transcended physical sense to the extent that you didn't even have to be physically present to receive the message. You received it wherever you were. I only wish you could know the amount of letters that I receive telling me of the subject of my talks before I give them. Because these people, or after I have given a talk like this, then received a letter saying, wasn't this your subject and this is the way you outlined it? Why, yes, of course. Why does anyone have to be physically present to receive an impartation of spirit? And that's what is happening. This is not a message coming from me to you. This is a message of the Spirit that is just coming through me. But if you're tuned in, you don't have to be physically present to receive it. Only don't try to do that either until the Spirit has prepared you for that. You see, all things come to us, watch, all things come to us by grace. But we prepare ourselves for the reception of grace by the activity of truth in our consciousness. Paul, Saul of Tarsus, could not have received the divine grace on the road to Damascus had he not prepared himself by his searching and seeking of God, of truth. That was his preparation for the activity of grace, the activity of the light. John, in the same way, John had to prepare himself before he could be a vehicle, and so everyone I have ever known who became a practitioner or who became a teacher prepared themselves days, weeks, months, years, opening their consciousness to truth, becoming filled with truth, and then all of a sudden one day what seemed to be a miracle took place. And the person who yesterday was filled with the idea of just business and ordinary life, the very next day was imbued with the power and presence of the Spirit itself. Now, no one can deserve the grace of God, because you can't be good enough humanly to deserve God's grace. But you can prepare yourself for the gift of God in this wise. It does require a dedication even to remember every hour to give this 1 minute or 2 minutes to the realization of truth. Tonight, our realization of truth is this: God is the life of individual being. God is the soul of individual being. Wherever we see it, God is the activity taking place in the ocean. God is the activity taking place in the air. God is the activity taking place in plant life, animal life, mineral, vegetable life. God is the activity taking place in human consciousness, lifting human consciousness up to itself, up to the divine. God is operating right now in human consciousness throughout this world to destroy the forces of evil that operate in men's thoughts and to bring them to the realization of their divine sonship. There is, right at this moment, an influence of God operating in human consciousness to lift all of us unto its bosom, unto its being, up to divine sonship. Now, wherever you go this week, whatever you do, recognize God, whether you call God life, truth, love, mind, spirit, soul, principle, law, whatever name you give to God makes no difference. Understand that that which you know to be God is the animating principle of all that is. That God is the animating principle of individual being, of the human world, animal, vegetable, mineral, of all that is. God is the animating principle, the substance, the cause, and the law unto all that is. And always remember that it is this invisible presence